All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the 11th episode of the Jon Gil podcast show, and I am super excited to announce that we have probably the most handsome attorney in all of Chicago here with us today. So we're very fortunate. All right, ladies and gentlemen. But before we begin, I want to thank our partner, Element Studios. That's EL3 MENT Studios. They're a full-service media production company here in Chicago. So go ahead and check them out at their Instagram. They do great productions. Well, Mr. Eli Morgenstern, how are you?
I am very well. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So Eli is, again, he's a full-time real estate attorney, practicing commercial and residential, works at PreroLaw, PC. They're based out of Skokie, and they've actually transacted on over $1 billion in real estate, which is very impressive. And he's also a part-time comedian at the Second City. Yeah. So we're going to hear some law, and hopefully we're going to hear some stand-up comedy here as well, or some comedy, excuse me. Right?
Yeah, I mean, stand-up is tough in a setting like this, but we'll see what we can do. We'll see how many jokes we can get out.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today. This is awesome. We're great friends, and you've also been our attorney for a long time now. And why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit more about yourself? What is it that you do, and how you got involved in the industry?
Yeah, so I graduated from law school about 7 years ago or so, and I honestly, the job market was not great at the time, and I got very lucky because I got offered a job from Alicia Prero, the owner of PreroLaw, and he basically said he would mentor me and teach me everything he knows about law. He did real estate law. At the time I started working for him, it was probably 50-50 residential commercial. At this point, we're more like 90% commercial, 10% residential. And he trained me up he taught me how to practice law. And
Amazing. How important was that to have a mentor being right out of school, entering the workforce? How important would you say mentors are?
So this may come as a shock to everyone, but one of the last things that law school teaches you how to do is practice law. So
okay, hold on. Explain that really.
So what you learn in law school is generally something called black letter law. You learn statutes, you learn kind of the history of law, you learn like basically the rules of behind law, but how to actually say walk into a courtroom, how to come to a real estate transaction, what documents you need for a real estate transaction. I'm going to focus more on real estate because I know a lot more about that than litigation.
Sure.
But how to just what to do in general is all on the job training, and having a mentor there to show you the ropes is extremely important in the practice of law.
Wow. And so you graduated approximately during the recession?
Well, 2012. I'm not sure how the market as a whole was then, but certainly the job for lawyers was not great.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go even before that. What were you doing before law? I mean, what got you interested in law? How did you end up in where you're at today?
So I grew up in West Rogers Park in Chicago. Perhaps this is what you're trying to get at me. I grew up as an Orthodox Jewish man, and which is very religious type of Judaism. Keeping Shabbos, Sabbath, no electricity. And throughout law school and a little after, I actually became not religious and haven't been since then. But how I got interested in law was Well, if I'm being really honest, it's
Of course, we have to be really honest
wh-
here.
when you're a young Jewish man, there are really only three jobs available to you. There's accountant, doctor, or lawyer.
Right.
So I wasn't great with numbers. I was an EMT for very briefly and did not enjoy it. So I didn't like medical stuff. So I only had one option.
Well, thank God, because you've been great at it. I'm telling you, trust me. We've seen how he's transacted some of our deals too. So he's amazing.
Thank you.
And so you got involved into the career. What would you say the most challenging part getting into? What has been the most challenging part of your field when you did your first real estate transaction? What would someone have to know right off the bat? Hit the ground running, getting into that industry.
So to do,
excuse me, working on specifically real estate transactions. What's the quickest way or the best way to go into it head first?
as a real estate attorney,
Right.
So I'm going to reiterate what we talked about earlier. Having a mentor, at
Right.
least like in the beginning, is very important. Not everyone can have a mentor. I get that. You just have to. This might be a bit of a niche recommendation, but there's an organization called ICL out there that releases these smart guides that are great guides to how to do all types of law, including real estate transactions. But one thing, besides for the specific technicalities of a real estate transaction, which everyone has to learn, there are some broader concepts which I think may be very useful as far as how to be.
Mm-hmm.
There are some myths as to what makes a good attorney out there.
Let's get into that.
Some people watch attorneys on TV a lot. And what you tend to see is that attorneys are very tricky and very aggressive. Those are very bad traits in real estate law.
Thank you for mentioning that, by the way.
Yeah. In real estate law, it's all about, you have to remember this principal concept that everybody is on the same side. Your opposing counsel is not your opposition, he's your partner. And you have to think of it that way, because if you do not, I have seen many deals go down the tube because an attorney, I shouldn't say I've heard of, because usually when I'm involved, not to brag, I do everything I can to save it because I follow this rule. But I've heard of deals just failing because of attorneys' egos, because they cannot get past, I think this is the right thing to be in the contract. This is what I believe. I don't care what you say, this or nothing. And who does that serve? Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't to win a particular argument, it's to get the transaction closed. And those attorneys actually have a specific name in the industry. They're called deal killers.
Yes.
I'm sure you've heard of them and probably witnessed them.
And I've witnessed, yeah, absolutely. Those are the worst. That's why I said earlier, thank you for mentioning that, because, that's actually a great point. The ego is what really kills deals. You have brokers, or not brokers, but you've got these attorneys that are just like, I don't know why they think they've got to be pit bulls. But everything, I've always been more, you want to take a more relaxed attitude. You want to get the deal done. Like you said, you're in there, everyone's in there to win, get the deal closed. So I've really admired how you put our transactions together, and how even we've had some turbulent, no deal is going to be 100% clean, right? But the way that your attitude towards that turbulence is what really determines sometimes that outcome. So anyway, just saying that you're doing a great job there.
Well, thank you. I'll take the compliment.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, I came up, so one of my first clients was actually Jon. And one of my first real estate transaction was one of Jon's first deals, I think, as a purchaser. Correct me if I'm wrong. With his current business partner, Anand. And I still remember, I was green as grass on a spring day, walking into that thing into that transaction. And thankfully, I was prepared. Going back to the mentor, I was well trained, and my boss was available to call whenever I had any issues and wanted to bounce something off of him, and we got it done. And I feel like Jon has evolved immensely since then.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. See, there's a little bit going back and forth here with the compliment. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, and I've not to get into specifics, but we've been involved in many transactions since then, and Jon keeps a very level head, I feel like, when things get hairy.
Well, and that goes back to your point, right? I mean, we leave ego out the window or out the door, and just focus on getting the deal done. Let's talk about some of the deals that you've worked on,
Sure.
And let's hear some of the crazy stories that actually anyone looking to buy real estate will learn from, because they can manage expectations. Let's say so.
I have to be a little careful in the details. This is going to be broadcast, so I'll keep a lot of details vague. I'm going to highlight some certain points things that happened in the deal. There was one transaction where there was a survey, in order to describe property in Cook County, there's something called a legal description. And for larger transactions, they tend to put that in the contract so that the specific property. And they're very difficult. The bigger the property, the harder it is to read these.
And we're talking, this was almost an entire city, I should say. This deal was huge.
It was one of the largest contiguous residential properties in Illinois. It was, and I actually, this was one of the largest deal I had done to that point. And I remember my boss giving me a survey. The survey covered an entire conference room table. And on a survey, just so you know, think of it like an overhead map of the property. And he said, take this legal description, take these markers, and trace the entire legal description on this survey. It took me almost an entire day. It was Herculean task, but I checked it several times and realized there was a corner of the property that just wasn't there. And then we told our client, and our client's like, what is going on? And we had kind of found out that it was withheld purposely. Now, who withheld it and why, people can guess. But it was an example of people thinking being tricky is smart. And, but what it almost destroyed the deal. And there is someone who actually was there that saved the deal. If you want, you can say, Jon, but I won't. But someone, someone was involved who saved the deal, and it actually ended up happening, but only because everyone else just kept level head and realized that, okay, we want this to happen, and we figured out a solution. But that's an example of.
That was insane. Yeah, absolutely.
And there are so many. I'm trying to think offhand of some other crazy things like. Let's go. If something pops up, we can come back to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but that's how it goes. I mean, in this business, you never really know what you're going to discover. It's super important to have the right attorney on your side that's going to be looking out for your best interest than just turning over every rock, right? Looking at all the details, and it's insane. I mean, that could have cost, I think that specific example that you gave earlier could have totally killed the deal. I mean,
right.
And it was a combination of, again, just being level-headed, explaining, to all the parties that, hey, you know what, we all want to get there. Let's just figure this out.
Right.
There's always a solution to every problem.
Right.
For the most part.
Yeah. And that's that's really, if there's any secret, I mean, we're reiterating this, but if there's any secret to being good at a real estate transaction, it's that, keeping level head. And I also want to say, so that for an attorney, that's what's important. But if you are a client, there's another thing that's very important, which is the forest for the trees. Everyone's heard that expression. It's cliche, I know, but I cannot tell you how many times I've had a client nickel and dime over $500 when, for example, like you'll nickel and dime the contract over $500, delaying the closing. There's rent coming in at several $100s a day. Every day you delay the closing, you're losing several $100s when you could have closed and gotten that rent. So that's just like an example of like people not thinking through the entire big
not
picture.
seeing the bigger picture, not seeing the picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point. And how do you manage exactly, you've got a lot of deals now, like you said, your firm has transacted on over $1 billion, okay, in real estate transactions. And how do you manage the sheer size of just the daily tasks? You've got due diligence expiration dates. You have inspection expiration dates. You've got closing extensions. You have mortgage contingency dates that are about to expire. What are some tricks that help you stay organized?
So it's actually a very simple answer. It sounds like it would be complicated, but if anyone has ever heard of the program Asana, it's this program that kind of keeps
Asana. So ASANA.
Yeah, .com. Not that I'm trying to advertise for Asana, but it's been very helpful.
Well, I just wrote it down, by the way, because I need that.
And it can push dates to your Google Calendar, which it does, and you can sort by tasks by date. So you can say, what are my tasks for the next week? And it will show you in order what you got to do. And I just look for dates. And then if I see a mortgage contingency date, which is a date that the client has to cancel the contract if they can't get a mortgage, I call the client. I say, how are things going? And it's been extremely helpful, and it keeps me from blowing it, because one thing that's very important in real estate, as in litigation, a lot of aspects of law, is dates. Dates are very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If a mortgage commitment is not extended on time, your client can lose their earnest money.
Correct. Yes.
And what happens in that specific case? What if someone's attorney failed to extend a mortgage commitment, and now they're held liable because they didn't send the extension? Do they lose their earnest money? Does the buyer go after their attorney? What happens in that specific case?
So if you're a good attorney, which I tend to be,
right? Absolutely.
I tend to hope I am, I should say. You tell your client in advance. Like when you have your initial discussion reviewing the contract, you give them the dates. Now, let's be honest. A lot of my clients hear that date and it goes in one ear out the other. Okay, whatever. And so that's how I try to prevent. So the way I try to prevent, a malpractice claim, which is one repercussion of not, is I tell them up front, I make sure so that I'm covered, but I still, to protect my client, because ultimately that really is my goal.
Right.
I remind them right beforehand as well, as backup. But what happens if you blow a mortgage contingency date? If your lender cannot give you a buyer a mortgage, and you come to the closing date comes and passes, and they can't get the mortgage, they lose the earnest money, which on a smaller deal can be a few thousand. It could be a few $100,000 on the larger deals. Gotta be very, very careful with that.
Mm. Well, wow. Yeah, I mean, it's that's why I mentioned the importance of dates and just keeping the commitments there.
Right?
So now let's get a little bit into the comedy. What does Eli Morgenstern do outside of law? And I know that you work from dusk till dawn. So I mean, what are your hobbies? When do you have time to even go and how do you balance the work life schedule?
Really, the primary way is I try to do my strategy now is to do all my work during the week so that my weekends are free. Hence my staying late in the office schedule. Very often I'll be there till 7 or 8 p.m. sometimes. And I tend to try to work out in the morning. And I actually work out with your
Yes, Eli LaFour. He was on
previous
the
guest.
show. Yeah, he was on the show a few shows back, and we actually mentioned you as well. I said, you know what? I have a great idea. I'm going to put the before and after because Eli, when we met, you were always like I said, he's Chicago's most handsome attorney. He
Oh.
was then, but imagine look at him now. But no, I mean you've an amazing transformation. How has that benefited also your work, your confidence, and everything else?
It's important, and I'll also tie this in with the comedy thing.
Yeah.
So again, this is cliche, but having lived through it, like I can tell you, it's cliche for a reason. Fitness, fitness number one is extremely important to just confidence. Being confident in a room, you walk into a room and feel good about yourself. People sense that, and it allows you to, it makes people. I'm trying to think to say this in a way that doesn't sound manipulative, but it makes people more willing to work with you and to agree with you when you have that confidence, and
Goes a long way.
yeah, and it's been extremely helpful in my career. And the comedy is it's not necessarily about comedy specifically. Having something that rounds you out as a human being, as a person, is important because having a hobby, when you talk to people, it allows people connect with you.
Absolutely.
When you say, "Oh, I'm in it," some people and most attorneys actually, at least real estate attorneys, do have a side gig. My boss is in a band. He's in a classical rock band called Evan Shasia. I guess I'll shout it out with
Yeah.
a bunch of his peers. Like I think there's a dentist in there and an accountant.
Amazing.
But having a hobby really rounds out your character, and it helps you connect with people, but something that I think is very good and specific to comedy is so just to clarify what I've done, most of my comedy is not professional. It's classes. I take like training classes at Second City.
Which, by the way, Second City, can you explain a little bit to the audience? I mean,
so Second
probably
City,
90% of the audience should know, but the 10% that don't.
right. So Second City, for those who don't know, is a comedy school in Chicago that teaches a range of comedic arts. Think improvised comedy, which is making things up on stage. They teach stand-up comedy, which is probably one of the most popular forms. So everyone knows that. They teach sketch writing. Sketch writing, the easiest way to describe it is think Saturday Night Live. How to write, those are sketches.
Yeah, but I want you to explain who the people who the most famous people have come out of Second City.
So, I mean, just name a few: Amy Poehler, Steve Carell, Aidy Bryant is a more recent one. And I'm blanking. I mean, there are just so many.
So many.
I mean, I would say a very significant percentage of the current comedy community that people that are famous have taken classes at Second City.
You've heard him here first, ladies and gentlemen, Eli Morgenstern. So, when you see him a few years from now, also
maybe
directing.
If it happens, maybe not for a while. Right now, the law is more
No, of
my
course, of
primary
course.
thing. But one thing that I will say that is specific to comedy and even like improvised comedy class at Second City, um, is it helps you communicate with people, and it trains you improvised comedy how to listen and react. And it's hard to pinpoint like precisely, oh, I reacted this way because of my training at Second City, but I've felt an overall um
Confidence.
confidence and increase in my ability to talk to people and to just like listen, even if it's like another attorney. And sometimes you really have to listen for what the issue is when you're negotiating, because it's not always what they're saying. Sometimes you have to read between lines, and I'd say it's helped me in the comedy, taking all these comedy classes, to do that better.
Awesome. That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, definitely the importance of just having extracurricular activities that you
Yeah,
can do besides work is definitely part of the full um, balance of life.
right.
So now, going to some of your, not going into any details on your clients, but are there any specific traits that you see among your most successful clients versus your most challenging? Do they have certain habits or behaviors that are kind of consistent?
Uh, so so I will say that clients come in all shapes and sizes, literally and figuratively. And the and I won't say that I have had aggressive clients who, like I say, don't see the forest for the trees, like I touched on earlier, who are very successful. Like, I won't sit here and tell you that, you can't be successful if you have those traits. But the clients I feel like are the most successful and tend to grow the fastest are the ones who, like I said before, see the forest for the trees. It's the ones who can take everything in context and can take a monetary or even like a risk hit in a negotiation
Mm.
in order to get the deal done, when we get to a point that it's like that if you don't agree to this, the deal's over. Um so I do think that is one of the most important traits in a client. I also think, and having said that, I do want to say there is actually a saying in the real estate community, at least among attorneys: some of the best deals you've ever done are the ones you don't do. And
Mm.
and another good trait, as much as I say it's good to get the deal done, is to not get your head so in the deal that you ignore the warnings of your attorney. If like there was a deal I did once for a client, and it was a condominium. And if anyone doesn't know how a condominium works, think of it like it's an apartment building, except a person owns each unit individually, and there is a master association that governs and does maintenance on the building, and who you pay money to do maintenance. And my client wanted to buy a big chunk with the eventual goal of maybe taking over the whole building, buying piece by piece. But the problem was the chunk wasn't enough to control the building. It was less than a controlling portion that they could have
Mm.
controlled the board that's in control of the building. And I read through the condo declaration for him. I said, they can pass anything they want, and you cannot do anything about it, including raising assessments on the building, which means raising what people have to pay. And when I described this to my client, he thought it was very hard because it seemed like a great deal. And I described it, and he thought about it, and it was tough, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to pass." And what ended up happening was someone else bought the deal, and they were in litigation for 2 years because what happened? The condo board had a new piggy bank to fix all the problems they've always wanted to fix. This rich developer buying all these units,
Wow.
like here you go, assessments triple, and you got to pay these, and
Unbelievable.
and they sued them over it, and I understand they were in litigation for a few years. Now, were they successful in the end? I don't know, but why do you want to buy a litigation? Why do you want to buy hassle? Unless there's some people who have a business model based off that. But if that's not what you want and you just want to buy real estate.
Well, unless there's extreme upside. I mean,
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
But litigation is inherently very risky. So I always recommend stay away from litigation to clients.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a great example. Well, now kind of shifting gears here a little bit. When can we all see you at the Second City?
So I actually just did a storytelling show, which is kind of comedy, the other night. But I don't have any current plans, and I'm not even sure I would say those plans if I did, because I am by no means a professional comedian. I am a strictly amateur. So exactly. And so nothing right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we just wanted to go ahead and right before we ended, give you that last plug because, I definitely have to see you soon.
John, you are the first person I'll tell next time.
Thank you.
I have something going on.
All right. Awesome. Well, right before we end, we want to go ahead and thank our partner, Element Studios. That's EL3 MENT Studios. Go ahead and check them out at their Instagram page, Element Studios. They're a full-service media production company here in Chicago, and they do just amazing work. But right before we end, Ellie, any last tips, advice, strategies that you can give to anyone entering into the field of law?
One final tip I'll give you is something that happened to me when I got out of law school, where I told you I got an offer from my boss, but at the same time, I got a better offer for almost double the money from something called document review. It's like a something only lawyers can do related to cases. Not to go into too many details. But it's a type of job where there's no real future and they don't really train you how to do anything. It's menial stuff that only attorneys can do, like reviewing stuff for litigation. And then my boss said, I can't pay you. I can only pay you half, but I will teach you everything I know about law. Always take the mentor, even if it's less. I mean, always take the mentor.
Amazing, Amazing last advice. Well, Ellie, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been great. And just want to say thank you, not for just being a friend, and for being an amazing attorney as well. So we've had a good run, and we're going to hopefully have much better experiences and more closings here stepping into 2020. So wishing you a very happy new year. And just want to say again, thank you for everything that you've done for us.
Looking forward to much future business with you, and thank you again for inviting me on your podcast.
Well, I'll say cheers to that. And with that, we want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Jon Gil Podcast Show. Thanks again.